So I made a video a couple of days ago on who should Volk fight next. You know, the featherweight division is in a bit of a log jam. There's a good amount of fighters that have a good reason to fight for the belt next. And so, you know, the division above it, you know, where ILIA'S champ right now is actually in a whole completely different scenario, or the opposite scenario, where there's a bunch of fighters that are gonna fight next for the belt, but they all have a good reason as to why they don't deserve it. So it's kind of funny to think about, you know, two divisions next to each other, complete different scenarios when it comes to the title contentions. But yeah, let's quickly go over the four people I had, the four fighters I have that should fight, that can fight for the belt next, not that should. So yeah, usually 3 columns here. These are gonna be the first 3 columns. I have 3 columns after this. Each column is gonna be ranked 1 through 4. I mean 1 through 5. I mean, and I'm gonna have 4 fighters. You can see 4 horizontal columns. So yeah, just quickly go over them. Armin, Max, Patty, and Justin. You can see the score system on the right side of the screen. Each gonna be starting at 0. By the end of it, they're gonna have the, you know, the total amount of numbers they're gonna have, and whoever has the highest is gonna fight ILIA next. You know, very basic, basically. So yeah, let's just start off with Armin. Last performance, basically your last performance, 0, you got destroyed. 5, you dominated your opponent. And we're gonna go with 3 with Armin. It was a very close fight, very back and forth with what was Charles Oliveira. And you know, there was a point where Charles almost subbed Armin. Armin had a good moments. He had that hammer, the hammer kick. It was an interesting back and forth grappling as well. But I will give it a 3 overall. It was decent. It wasn't too impressive, you know, especially relative to Charles Oliveira's last performance. You know, that was a crazy performance by ILIA. So I'm gonna give it a 3. I'm gonna give Max a 4. It was actually a pretty entertaining fight against Dustin. You know, Dustin, it was his last fight, so he wasn't really in his prime. But Max had really great moments. He dropped Dustin like 1 or 2 times, or 3 times, I think. There was a moment where Dustin hurt Max, but it was such a great fight. Great striking from both fighters. You know, the ending was kind of anticlimactic in a way because, you know, Max wanted to stand and bang, and Dustin just started grappling. But that's because Max was just very dominant in that moment. And so I'm gonna have to give Max a 4 for that. It was really good. I want to say 5. It wasn't like too spectacular. It wasn't like one of the best performances out there, but yeah, 4. So I'm gonna give Patty a 4 because it was kind of the same way Max beat Dustin, where you know, Patty was beating Michael Chandler, but there was a moment where Michael Chandler was hurting Patty, and you know, but Patty got the finish. And so, you know, I would have to give it a 4. I wouldn't say a 5 because if it was 5, it would be like a ILIA versus basically his Volk, or ILIA versus Charles Oliveira. But yeah, for that reason, I'm gonna give Patty a 4. Makes sense in my opinion. And Justin Gaethje, I'm gonna give him a 3. Basically the same way as, you know, Armin versus Charles. It was a back and forth, and for the most part, Justin was beating Fiziev. He was, you know, beating a short notice fighter, so you know, he didn't really dominate him. He didn't KO him. You know, even though he beat him the first fight, he didn't really show huge improvements on beating a shorter notice Fiziev. So for that, I'm gonna give him a 3. It wasn't too crazy. It was a good performance, but not anything as amazing relative to other performances we've seen in the UFC. So for notable wins, basically 0, you have 0 good names on your resume. 5, you have 5 or more good notable names on your resume. I'm gonna give Armin a 3. He has Joel Alvarez, he has Beneil Dariush, and he has Charles Oliveira. So those are 3 notable wins in my opinion. I don't know if you don't want to count Joel, or you think Beneil's overrated or whatever. But in my opinion, I'm gonna give him 3 because those are actually 3 good wins on his resume, and it makes sense in my opinion. So I'm gonna give him a 3. Max, he's a legend. He has so many good names on his resume. He has like probably easily like around 8 or 9 like wins that are like huge name value. So I'm gonna give him 5. There's self-explanatory. Petty, he only has 1. He only has Michael Chandler. Even Michael Chandler's even like an iffy one because he's old, basically should retire soon. And it was I mean, let's be honest, Michael Chandler hasn't really been doing that amazing in the UFC. He's like, what is he, 2 or 4 or 2 and 5 or something around there. So yeah, it's very hard for me to give Patty a 0. I mean, give him a 1 rather than a 0. But I'm gonna give him the 1 just to be fair. That is a decent one. And also, Justin Gaethje is in the same boat as Max Holloway. He has a good amount of wins. Easily has a minimum of 5 like big name wins he has on his resume. So yeah, same boat as Max. And for activity, 0 you skip a year, and 1 you fight once a year, and then 5 you fight like 4 times a year. So around there, similar. Activity, I'm gonna give Armin a 0. He hasn't fought in over a year. He even was gonna fight and pulled out, so I'm gonna give him a 0 for that. I'm pretty sure everybody doesn't want Armin to fight. Everybody that doesn't want Armin to fight is because he's inactive. That's for the only reason. So it makes sense to give him a 0. Max, he's a 1, but he only fought once this year, and very likely he's only gonna fight once next year, realistically. I'm gonna give him a 1 for that. Patty, I'm gonna go 1. He's the exact same way as Max right now. He only fought once this year, and I don't know. He's probably not gonna fight again this year unless he fights. Unless he doesn't fight for the belt, he fights Armin or he fights Justin or someone else. Realistically, he's only gonna fight once this year, and I'm gonna give him 1. And Justin, he's exactly the same boat as everybody else, the other two. He only fought once this year, and he's only fought once for the past couple years. So realistically, I'm gonna give him 1. So 1-1-1 for all these. The end score for all the first 3 columns is 6-10, 6-9. So, and the lead is Max Holloway. Now for a winning streak, basically 0, you lost your last fight, 5, you won your last 5 fights, or you're on a winning streak, or you're undefeated, or whatever. So yeah, Armin, I'm gonna give him 4. He's on a 4-win streak. Yes, you can say that Matheus Gamrot was a robbery, but I'm just gonna go off just what's on paper and then go with 4. Whatever, it doesn't even matter. Max Holloway, I'm gonna give him a 1. He's on a 1-win streak. He got chinned by Ilya the 2 fights ago, and then beat Dustin Poirier. So 1-win streak. Patty, he's on a 5-win streak. He is undefeated in the UFC. He's only lost in the regional scene. So I'm gonna give him 5. I guess you can say the same thing. He should have lost the Jared Gordon fight, but was the Jared Gordon fight within 5 fights? It was his 4th fight ago. So yeah, whatever. But yeah, I'm gonna go what's on paper. I'm gonna give him 5. He's undefeated in the UFC. So. And Justin, he's on the same boat as Max Holloway. He lost to Max Holloway 2 fights ago, and then beat Fiziev in the rematch. So there you go. There's a 1 for Justin. Hype is a relative, personal opinion. Who I think is hype, who I don't think is hype. 0, nobody cares about you. 5, you're a superstar. You're when you aren't like in fight camp or whatever, or your fight isn't coming up, people are still talking about you. So yeah. Armin, I'm gonna go him a 2. He does have a big fan base when it comes to Armenia. That's where he's from, right? Armenia. And some, when he was about to fight Islam, he had a good amount of fans that were also Armenian. So he has that fan base, and I feel like some people are backing up Armin because there's a potential he's gonna fight Ilya, and some people don't like Ilya, so they're gonna back up Armin. So I'm gonna give him a 2. So even though he's very boring and a lot of people don't like him, like a good chunk of UFC fans don't like Armin, he does have a somewhat. He's like a 2. He's like a 2. Max, he's a 4. He's not a superstar. He's not a Ilya. He's not a Alex Pereira. He's not a Conor McGregor. But he is a pretty big superstar within his own right when it comes to just being in the sport for a long time. He's very recognizable, especially if you're like a casual. And yeah, he is a 4 easily. 3 would be a crime. 5, realistically, he isn't. But it's a 4 for Max Holloway. 3, gonna give it Patty. Patty, he caters to the casual audience very well because he is a loudmouth. He does have some finishes. He likes to strike rather than just completely. There's a bug in here. Rather than completely just want to grapple. So he is casual friendly. He does have England backing him up. And yeah, so I'm gonna give him a 3 because he isn't a superstar. Like he isn't as big as Max Holloway, and he isn't a superstar at all. Like when it comes to like the Conor McGregors and the Ilias, but he is he does have a following, and I feel like him being attached to Ilya does give him a 3. He gives him a 3, or maybe he is a 4. But maybe I would say it's a 3 because a lot of people don't like him as well. Like the same reason people don't like Armin, a lot of people don't like Patty, and that bumps him down to a 3 rather than a 4. And the next is Justin. I'm giving a 3. A couple years ago he would have been a 4, but right now he is almost retiring. He is like basically at the end of his career. So usually when fighters are at the end of the career, they kind of lose hype because a lot of fighters are, a lot of fans are realizing, yeah, this guy isn't gonna be touching the belt soon, so why even bother backing him up? And yeah, I'm gonna give him a 3. He's a 4 in his prime. He's a 4, but right now he's a 3. Especially right now, people don't want to see him fight for the belt soon, and there are they don't really care about Justin right now because he got killed by Max Holloway and had a very uninteresting performance against Fiziev. So I think it's a 3. I think it's a 3. Hype matchup basically means two fighters that aren't interesting could have a really high matchup. Stylistically, I used the example Hill versus Roundtree, like when I made the Volk video. Hill and Roundtree, respectively, aren't that exciting on their own when it comes to like fan base. But you put them together in a cage, and the build up for that fight is big. A lot of people were hyped for that fight, and so on and so forth with other fighters, other matchups. So yeah, I'm gonna give Armin a hype matchup against Ilya. How hype would that be? A 3, because I feel a lot of people at the same time that his personal hype kind of affects this, because people don't even like Armin to begin with. They don't like him. He's inactive, and that really hurts a hype matchup against Ilya. I would say if Armin, I would say maybe if he was active, this would be a 4 to 5. But because he's inactive, I'm gonna have to give him a 3, because it's like he's undeserving and he's a grappler. We don't really like grapplers, so there you go, a 3 hype matchup. Like I feel like people are gonna think of he's gonna want to grapple with Ilya and make a boring fight. Like he's not gonna stand and bang. He's gonna be scared to strike with Ilya and just wrestle him. So that's why I think it's a 3 at the very end of the whole scenario as to why it's a 3. Max Holloway, I'm gonna give him a 3 for a different reason. He already fought Ilya. He got destroyed. Granted, he had when it comes to Ilya being champ or fighting for the belt, he had the best performance against Ilya. He went to the 3rd round and did put some bruises on Ilya, but he got destroyed in the 3rd round. Got first time getting KO'd. And even though this is a rematch at a different weight class, it's gonna be a different narrative. Can Max Holloway at lightweight, now being more heavier and with more power, is he a bigger threat than Ilya? Who's, let's be honest, he's more of a 145er rather than a 155er, and Max is a 155er. There is that narrative. I think Max needs one more fight to make this a 4. Let's be honest. He needs just one more fight. This is a 4 to 5. 4 to 5, but right now it's a 3, because it is a little early for Max to just go in there. One fight in between rematching Ilya, and he didn't really have a crazy performance against Justin Poirier, who was retiring that fight. So I would give Max Holloway a 3 for right now. If he does fight Ilya next, it's gonna be like, it's interesting, but yeah, I feel like Max Holloway needed one more fight to get ready for Ilya. I think it's a little bit too early, so I'm gonna give him a 3. Paddy Pimblett, a 5. I know you're gonna be calling me crazy, but let's be honest. If I gave him a 4, he would have tied with Holloway, and I would rather see Paddy over Holloway fight Ilya, in my personal opinion. Because it's a fresh matchup. They have that back and forth with that press conference. They have history behind the scenes. They hate each other. They trash talk. And Paddy has a somewhat of a fan base. Ilya has a huge fan base. He is a superstar almost. He's like, he is one of the guys when you think of the UFC right now in 2025. So it is gonna be a hype build up, hype match, hype everything, hype fight. That even while watching the fight, it's gonna be really exciting to see. So yeah, and there's the size difference. Paddy, even though Ilya technically can be said he's leagues above Paddy when it comes to skill, there's a size difference. Paddy's huge at 155. So I think it's a very interesting. I feel like everybody can get behind this fight if it does happen. Next, even though the only caveat is that he only fought bums, but let's be honest, we're all gonna be excited for this fight if it does get announced. So yeah, so I give him a 5. I would say this is kind of the same level as Ilya versus Islam for different reasons. That one's like the number 1 versus who's gonna be the pound for pound number 1. And that but they don't really talk trash to each other. It's just more like a competitive spirit type of fight rather than a actual hate each other type of fight. So in my opinion, it's a 5. Justin Gaethje fighting for Ilya is gonna give him a 2 because for the simple reason is nobody really wants to see this, except for the only fact that Justin is a GOAT of the sport. He is one of the the guys you think of when you think of the UFC. He is a big name, and he does have some power at 155, so he does have a chance to hurt Ilya. But aside from that, there's very little interest in this fight. It's like the least interesting fight. So it's not a complete uninteresting fight, but there is some like little caveats to the matchup where it's like kind of interesting, makes it somewhat interesting. It's kind of the same reason as like it's like a slightly less hype version of Charles Oliveira versus Ilya, where realistically Ilya was gonna wash Charles, but there were some things where like, oh, Charles is slightly bigger than Ilya, or he was a champ at 155 or whatever. There's like small narratives that can make this fight interesting, but it's a 2 in general. It's not very hype. And so yeah, so as you can see, the last remaining score 15, 18, 19, 15. And like I said, if I was gonna rate Paddy versus Ilya a 4, which it would have been, he was gonna tie with Max Holloway. And in my opinion, I would rather see Paddy over Max Holloway. Yeah. So that's how I rated this. With my system I created. There might be a few like other categories I'm missing, probably, like let's say, I don't know, like rankings or whatever, but that was my system I created, and I think it's kind of fair, and I think it makes sense for Elliot to fight Paddy right now. Armin inactive, Max, he needs one more fight. Paddy is also undeserving, but I think when it comes to like this bad bunch of right now in the lightweight division, this bad bunch of who deserves to fight next, I think Paddy is the least worst out of the 4. So there you go. You got Paddy fighting ILIA'S next year. Hopefully they fight in January or February, and that gives Ilya enough time to fight Max at the White House, which I said I would love to see Ilya versus Max at the White House for the main event. Max representing the US, Ilya representing some other country. And yeah, there you go. That's my video for today. Hope you guys enjoy, and goodbye.